And just like that, we are back for another edition of Going the Distance Live. I'm your host, Brandon Hudgens. As always, we're going to cover a wide range of topics tonight. The first thing, knock out a few things pretty quick here. I will be in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, at the University of North Carolina on this Saturday, April 7th at 9:30. If there are any vasculitis patients in North Carolina, I strongly encourage you to get out and come to the chapter meeting that we have this Saturday. They're going to be doing a big presentation on mindfulness. It was a huge, successful topic at the National Symposium last summer in Chicago, and it I assume will be just as popular this Saturday. Something they're going to cover a lot of topics, which is something that we've covered a lot on here before, which is managing stress, being mindful of what's going on, dealing with your disease. Dr. William Frey, who's putting it on or giving the talk, is worked for the UNC School of Medicine for over 17 years. Has co-authored a bunch of papers and research on mindfulness and dealing with that. He also has his own blog and stuff called Stress Tips, and as well as a book called Ease into Freedom, the keys for reducing stress and unlocking your potential. So I'm incredibly excited to hear him speak. It's going to be a lot of fun, I believe, to hear somebody way smarter than me talk about some of the things that are very important in my life and something that I preach a lot about anytime I get a chance to hear somebody that's extremely educated talk about a topic. I'm all ears, so I'm extremely excited about that on Saturday. I'll also, Dr. Frey will be doing a little bit. He'll be the main speaker, and then we have some breakout sessions and stuff. I will be leading one of those breakout sessions talking about exercise and stuff. So if you are coming, bring some questions. I'll be it's those smaller settings are a great way to have some good discussion. So I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has about that or about exercise and stuff then. So it looks like Mary Frances will definitely be there. I'm excited to see everybody. I'll also have some books if anybody's interested as well with me. I love the meetings. I love getting to share. I love catching up with people that you don't get to see very often. So your relationship is just seeing each other once or twice a year, keep following online. But it's always nice to see people face to face. Also, if you are in the High Country area, the Boone, Blowing Rock, Watauga County area, I will be up and running in Boone on April 19th. That's a Tuesday, I believe. I'll be out there hanging out for the group run and stuff, and also have some books available. And then finally, at the end of the month on April 28th is the big Veno for Vasculitis fundraiser in Raleigh. If anybody in the North Carolina area is interested in going, it's obviously a great event for a cause that's near and dear to my heart. As a group of friends has put together a wine tasting and auction for their friend Danielle that passed away, I believe, 8 or 10 years ago now. This will be the 5th annual one. So I'm really excited about it. Excited to be there. Excited to help celebrate Danielle's life with a cause that was very near and dear to her as well. Danielle passed away from GPA just like I have, so that's exciting to be a part of an event with a lot of really exciting people. If anybody's in the North Carolina area is interested, I'll toss up the link for that event right now in the chats there. So all the information's there. They also have a Facebook page and stuff as well. You can find all the information about getting tickets and I've been involved a little bit behind the scenes on some of this stuff too, and there are some super cool auction items up. So up for sale or up for auction, excuse me. So I'm really excited about that event. I'll also be blabbing a little bit and talking to everybody that's there for a few minutes before the auction goes off. So I think that's it for dates and stuff that I've got coming up here. We're looking to add some more on the calendar, as well as some more races and stuff. I'll be able to announce. I do know right now, barring nothing's majorly wrong with my heart, which we'll get into in a moment, that I will be opening my outdoor track season June 4th at the Music City Distance Carnival in Nashville, Tennessee. Excuse me, not June 4th, June 1st. I can't speak. I'll be at that event on that Friday night, racing the mile. In fact, actually, for those of y'all that have heard me talk about Cameron Magnum Bean before on this podcast, or seen me post things about him, actually that's him in the orange singlet there. Cameron passed away a few years ago. He got hit by a car while he was out running, and left on the side of the road, and unfortunately passed away due to the injuries and the brain trauma associated with that accident a few days later. So I run a memorial mile and 5K that his family and friends host in the Chattanooga area every summer. But actually, that's what the podcast and my profile picture was taken from this past summer. Even though I wasn't able to defend my title because of my ongoing health issues, I was there to support my best friend or one of my best friends and his family and friends as well. So I will definitely be back for that event in August this year as well. So anyways, that's what we got coming up on the docket for the next month or so. So I would like to go ahead and kind of hash into what happened over the last week or so. Since I saw y'all last, things in my world had been going very, very well as far as my health was concerned. I'd had my last Rituxan infusion a little over a month ago. Surprise, like it was obviously pretty rough for the first few days. In the first week or so, obviously there's always some lingering effects of that. But I was able to kind of resume running pretty quickly. Not obviously quite to the level that I would like to be, but I was able to get back out there and start getting some running in. Possibly too quick, might have overdone some things, but I was back in full swing, feeling good, was going to pace at the Raleigh Relays. Unfortunately, missed out on that opportunity because late Thursday evening, about 1 a.m., so I guess technically Friday morning, I woke up in my altitude tent here, which I'll actually try to show it to you. It's just like a giant trash bag over a bed, and there's a generator over here on the floor for anybody that's interested. It's one of the weird things that runners that live at sea level have to do, that don't have access to altitude camps and going and traveling away for years at a time, or not years at a time, months at a time, or several weeks at a time. So you sleep at a high altitude. So it's the whole principle of sleep high, train low. So you get the benefits of being at altitude without the physiological stress of training at altitude. So when you're at altitude, you also have to run a little bit slower because obviously there's less oxygen, et cetera, et cetera. Or not less oxygen, excuse me. I literally hear one of my exercise science professors from school. There's not less oxygen. The air is less dense. The amount of oxygen is still the same, but the air is less dense. So the altitude tent simulates that. So I sleep in that for various parts of the year, and has made our guest room / office here very cumbersome. but it's one of the things you have to do when you want to be really good at something. So I was sleeping in my altitude tent. Occasionally when you're adjusting to it, because I'd only been back in it for a little over a week, you'll wake up with respiration issues, not bad issues, but you'll if you're super tired or hadn't gotten adjusted to it yet, and this happens to at altitude, like you'll wake up because your breath gets a little shallow because you're tired and you haven't quite adjusted to the respiration rate that you need to maintain to sleep at that elevation. So I was sort of, sometimes you'll sort of wake up like, and your heart will be kind of racing. You're just like, I need to breathe. And then you'll breathe for a minute, and before you know it, you're back asleep. Well, I thought that had happened on late Thursday night into Friday morning when I woke up. It was somewhere between 12:45 and 1 a.m. or a little after 1 a.m., I think, somewhere in that time range. I woke up, and that's kind of immediately within the first second, I was like, I need to breathe. And then I was like, oh man, this isn't that. I'm breathing. And my heart's not racing. My heart rate's actually really slow. Oh no, my chest is hurting. This isn't good. And all I can describe, the only way I can describe the sense of feeling that happened was literally just this wave of a feeling of impending doom, like something was severely wrong. And then I noticed my mouth was a little dry. I was like, maybe I'm a little dehydrated. I need to get some water. So the first thing I did was get out of the tent, unzip the tent, got out of it, turned everything off, got some water, like sat down. I was like, what's going on here? Like, have I got too dehydrated? Like, yeah, my mouth's a little dry. That happens from time to time. Maybe I just hadn't kept up with my hydration status. It's kind of hard when you're getting back into training and your mileage is getting up, and there's a lot of other variables like the altitude tent. The weather's also getting warmer. So there's a lot of things that are kind of going on sometimes at one time. And sometimes one of the things that even as a pro is difficult to stay in front of is hydration status and making sure you're well hydrated. I normally do a pretty daggone good job of it. If I'm not sucking on this bottle all day long, I'm also pounding these boys all day long as well. So hydration is normally not an issue of mine, but I was like, maybe I've just gotten dehydrated and like everything's kind of working overtime right now. Like, let's just drink some water and kind of chill out here for a second, just see what's going on. Well, I did that, and after about 20 or 30 minutes of sitting and then laying back down, nothing seemed to change. And what was going on my chest didn't seem to kind of migrate over into my shoulder and my neck, and it was a really achy feeling, and there was a pressure feeling in my chest. Is the only way. It's not even really painful, and I'll go into more kind of what I was describing with the ER doctors in a bit, but like what I was feeling is like a lot of times is like, people when they talk about chest pain, to me, it wasn't really a pain, because like I'm so used to pain being like something physical, like through running, or whether it's like the weight, the feeling you get when you're lifting a lot of heavy weight, that's painful, or you've got like something that's actually physically hurt, like you sprained an ankle, or you tore a tendon or whatever, like those types of pain, or some of the pain that in my joints and stuff, or my ears and sinuses, and just general body aches that I've had from dealing with my vasculitis for years at times, like that pain's very different. And so like this was just more like an extreme kind of pressure in my chest. I was like, what is going on? And my heart rate felt really weak. Like my heart just felt like, instead of beating nice, and I know it's kind of hard to see with my crappy webcam here, but instead of your heart beating nice and strong, feeling like it just felt like it was barely kind of squeezing. And for those that don't kind of understand that feeling, see, a lot of people struggle to feel their own heart rate and heartbeat and stuff because, hey boo, I'm so skinny, and as well as being endurance athlete, like my heart was, nestled right up against my rib cage. And when I lay on my back and lay there quiet, I can feel my heart beating in my chest, as well as anytime if I'm just sitting here, I can put my hand against my chest and I can feel my heart beating against my chest. I'm very aware of what it feels like all the time. In fact, actually, my freshman year when I was at Winthrop, I thought I was having some kind of weird heartbeat skipping thing going on. And the athletic trainers and stuff actually ended up getting me to the ER, and then come to find out after a bunch of tests and having to be taken off running for a while, which actually caused me to miss junior nationals my freshman year, which I'm still a little bitter about. Found out I was just feeling PVCs, which are premature ventricular contractions, which almost everybody gets at some point in time in their life. It's just kind of basically like a neural little hiccup that happens a lot of times when people are tired or stressed out, or a little dehydrated, whatever they are, or you've had too much caffeine. There's a bunch of different things that can happen. So I was probably all of those, but most people don't feel or know that they're having them because you can't really feel them. But I was feeling them, so the doctors thought what I was feeling was actually a skipped heartbeat, which is not what it was. It was something completely not dangerous at all. So needless to say, I've also been to the ER for several other times. One when I was having a panic attack, and then the other time being when they thought my heart was skipping beats. I've been to the ER several times with heart issues, and this was a new one for me. And also I went for a third time about a year ago. After one of my other Rituxan infusions, I had a very, very faint feeling heartbeat. So that was also a little scary, but not as scary as this because there was no pain associated with that. There was no impending sense of doom with that spell last year. So there was none of the pressure feeling that I was feeling. There was none of the aching into the shoulder and to the neck. So after drinking water and like chilling out for like 20 or 30 minutes, which is not the right thing to probably do in this situation, had something major been going on, I probably should have gone a little bit quicker than I did. I went and woke up my girlfriend, and we immediately went to the ER here in High Point. She handled it super, super incredible. Because a lot of times, and anybody out there that ever ends up having to deal with a situation like this where you're trying to get people to the ER, the worst thing you can do is panic and get, sort of frazzled or kind of overly rush or get, all worked up and, get super chatty, start asking a million questions. Like, just go. Don't ask a million questions. Just go, because that's what you need to do. You just need to act, and that's exactly what Rihanna did, and she handled it like a soldier, just like an absolute soldier. And what got me to the ER, as I explained, the other 3 times that I've been to the ER with chest pain and tightness or weird heart feeling things, and they've been at 3 separate ERs, so I can say this without a doubt, this was the worst ER experience I've had in my entire life. Here at the unfortunately, it is a branch of the UNC system where I see all my other wonderful doctors, but is the UNC regional center hospital here in High Point. It's the closest one. We felt that it was probably better to just go ahead and drive over there as opposed to getting an ambulance and waiting for the ambulance to get here, because it's only about a 6 or 7 minute drive away. So we hopped over there, walked into the ER, and every other time I've ever been in the ER and talked about chest pain or tightness, the first thing they do after you tell them your name is somebody then comes out from the back and immediately goes and hooks you up to an EKG to make sure you're not experiencing a heart attack at that moment. Well, I got told to sit down and wait. And I was like, but I'm having chest pain. And she's like, okay, that's like, I kind of don't care about that. That's, somebody will be with you eventually. Well, somebody then, another nurse-ish thing, took my pulse with one of those finger things, not even like she was checking to feel anything. She took my pulse, which of course, even if you're in a heart attack, is going to still kind of be relatively normal unless you go into cardiac arrest. What which not everybody goes into cardiac arrest. And to explain a little bit about the difference between like cardiac arrest and a heart attack, like not everybody's heart actually completely stops, or that's when the heart attack gets dangerous. There's plenty of people that have had heart attacks, and their heart doesn't actually stop. So, they just took my pulse, and I told her what was wrong, and then she just sent me right back out of the waiting room. And then I had to go to billing and deal with billing people. And it was well over 40 or 45 minutes before I actually got taken to the back and was hooked up to an EKG machine, where then a nurse took the EKG. A nurse that doesn't even know how to read it took it and was like, well, I'm going to go have a doctor look over this. You can go back out to the waiting room. So they didn't leave me hooked up to any machines to see if I would, if it could have been getting worse, whether it could have gotten better. Anything. So I spent over an hour out in the waiting room between all of this. So had I actually been in the event, in a major heart event, and the pain at that point in time was still getting worse and creeping, continuing to creep further into my chest and down into my left arm. And of course, then you're also starting to get a little stressed out during that situation. So it was not very comforting to be in the hospital and not able to get care. And now I know the ER is not always the best place to go, but it's the place you're supposed to go when you're having an actual emergency. Now, of course, there was other people there. There was clearly people that had gotten a little too drunk or had been on other substances. There was lots of single mothers there with babies that were clearly sick or crying and stuff. And I'm not saying that those aren't important cases, but with kind of like the way the protocols and stuff go, like people that, as far as importance, people that are obviously like bleeding out and people that might be in the middle of a heart attack or a stroke or something like that are the people that are normally seen immediately, just to make sure that they're stable and nothing's going on so that they can then administer life-saving care. High Point Regional failed at that miserably, because even after I got into the room and somebody just checked me into the room and they then just hooked me up to the pulse thing and made sure my that's when somebody finally checked to see what my like oxygen saturation levels were and everything. They're like, well, your pulse is just your pulse is normal. So like, we think you're fine. It was hours before I saw a doctor. And this is going to sound completely ridiculous, and completely asinine and stupid, but I was at the point where I was like, I kind of want something to go wrong so that these people have to deal with the ramifications of it. I almost wanted to have had a heart attack so that, and medical malpractice is incredibly hard to sue in the state of North Carolina. Just to even bring a suit, you have to put up $20,000 up front to even bring a suit, which is absolutely ridiculous, which is what the doctors have all lobbied for, to protect their own interest when they screw up, which is stupid because sometimes you screw up, and that's why they have hospitals and doctors' offices have insurance to protect against stuff like that. But to make it to where it's that expensive to file something like medical malpractice, it should be illegal. So it takes, it's another situation where your rights as a patient are taken away from you when somebody else screws up. You're doing everything you're supposed to do. At one point in time, my girlfriend went out into the hallway to try to figure out what was going on because my symptoms were getting worse. We had not seen anybody. And a nurse or someone on the hospital staff yelled at her and told her to go back into her room. And she said, I'm not a patient. My boyfriend is having something going on with his heart and needs some attention. And they said, go back to your room. Somebody will be with you. Well, nobody came. Finally, somebody came, and a nurse came, and I, gave her all of my symptoms and everything I was going through. She's like, all right, well, we'll talk to the doctor. Then finally the doctor came in and ordered a couple of tests. One of them you kind of have to wait for, which is called the troponin test, which is a protein that your heart kicks out if there's been damage to the heart muscle. Normally that takes about 3 or 4 hours to show up in the blood. So we were almost at that mark, but not quite at that mark yet, by the time I saw the doctor for the first time. So they came in and ran some blood work, checked my electrolyte levels. She eventually got around to reading my EKG and looking at it, and she seemed to see nothing wrong with that. Then they did a chest x-ray. There was no enlarged heart. And then about 6 a.m., I got a CT scan. There was no fluid or anything around my heart. There appeared to be no blood clots. And then from 6 a.m. or about 6:30 a.m. when I got back into my room after all that, between 6:30 and 7 is kind of like when I got that chest CT done. It was 11:30 or 11 o'clock before I spoke with the doctor. And at that point, a nurse had come into the room to discharge me and said, we're going to let you go. And I was like, what? I haven't heard back from my test yet. She's like, oh, well, the doctor said you can go. And I was like, well, I would like to talk to her before I leave because I haven't gotten any answers. And, while some of the symptoms by that point had sort of subsided, there was still a lot of discomfort. So she's like, okay, well, I'll try to go find the doctor. So she leaves. And at this point in time, see, one other thing, all the other ERs I've ever been into, and anybody that's watched like shows like ER or House or kind of any other Scrubs, any other weird TV drama or comedy show, like the doors have always been glass so that they can see into them, or there's big windows so you can see into them. This was just like an examining room, like the doctor's office there in the ER in High Point. They shut the door and they shut you out of the world. I was we hit the button, which we had to find on our own, which was actually laying against the wall. We hit that. Nobody ever came. I started doing things at one point, like pulling the leads off of my EKG to basically mimic my heart stopping. Nobody ever came into my room then either. So I don't know what was going on. I literally, at one point, we probably could have just walked out and left. But anyways, finally, the nurse had like just stepped out and the door was kind of flung open and the doctor just kind of went walking past really quick. And she just like leaned her head back. It's like, we're going to let you go home. And I was like, ma'am, excuse me. Can you explain to me? She's like, yeah, everything's fine. I was like, so what? Like, you didn't find anything at all? She's like, no, nothing showed up on anything. And I was like, well, can you like take me through everything you've done? Like what? And it was like pulling teeth to get her to communicate with me. And this is one of the things that I was talking about last week, which is frustrating. It's one of the major flaws in our healthcare system. And I know the ER is not the place where you're going to get always the best care because there's constantly stuff happening. But I have had several other ER experiences with my heart, and then not just my heart. I've probably had 10 or 12 ER visits in my life for varying reasons. So I experienced what decent and good care is like, and I've also now experienced what absolutely horrendous care is like. And what I want to I even had this thought at one point in time when I hadn't heard from anybody and didn't know anything was going on. I was like, should I call 911 and call an ambulance to come get me, to take me to another hospital? Because I feel like I'm not getting the right care. And that's never a thought that you should have when you're in the hospital. Of course, the doctor had never really heard of granulomatosis with polyangiitis. She kind of vaguely knew what vasculitis was. So, of course, that requires them to go do some research. And I don't expect ER doctors to know a lot about it. Sometimes doctors will know more about it if somebody they had in school, somebody they studied under, it was one of their specialties or something, or where they did their residency at, or were in school at, is got a big rheumatology area that does a lot of vasculitis work. Sometimes you'll run into doctors that know more about it, but a lot of times, like I said last week, a lot of them is like they hadn't seen it really since a medical textbook. When they were in school, and that could have been 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, depending on the age of the doctor. So it requires them to do a little bit of research. I, of course, offered to give my doctor's information away, but they didn't really seem interested in that, which has also been unusual because every other time I've been in the hospital, and, we don't know if that episode could have been related to some of the medication that I was on, whether it was a side effect of the infusion, whether it's a possible side effect of my disease or whatever. She didn't want to communicate with my doctor at all. It's just like, all right, well, you're fine. Just, scram. We'll see you later, like get on out of here. It was frustrating because I left there with no answers. I got a bunch of blood work and a bunch of sheets of paper that give me really no answers. So, of course, by the time we left out of there, I was absolutely exhausted. I had not had, I'd had probably about an hour and a half or so, because I think I went to bed about 10:30 or so and woke up about 12. So I had an hour and a half or 2 hours of sleep. So I was exhausted, had been in there, and it's just anytime you're in the ER, it's not just physically exhausting, it's emotionally exhausting. It's draining. It was literally one of the scariest things I'd been through, because I legitimately thought that my heart was stopping. And I thought I was having a heart attack. And that's scary. And I've dealt with a lot of other health issues in my life. And with my vasculitis, there's been kind of some touch and go times where we didn't know how much longer I could kind of make it, or if certain things happen with my disease, then we might be looking at a situation where I might not make it. Luckily, it's never gotten down to a point where it's been like, well, he's only, if we don't do this, he might have, a month to live or anything like that. It's never gotten that. It's like, well, if we can't stop this by this point, or can't stop it like it's currently heading, then that's where we're, that's the next step. So I've dealt with a lot of kind of life and death and mortality situations in my own, but none of them so instantaneous feeling. So it's kind of thrown me for a loop. Probably not as much as it should have, because I've still been out running every day, of course, since that accident on Friday, because the best way for me to determine how I feel is to go run, because I know exactly what my body's supposed to feel like when that happens. So, of course, on Saturday, I was out jogging, and I went around people, and I had my phone with me, and I was actually running and talking on the headset, which is something I never do, but I was just running around some fields with one of my best friends, and if something had happened, there would have been people around to call the ER, or I could have called the ER because I had my phone, or my friend could have called the ER for me. So since then, I've been super diligent and made sure I've been either, if I'm by myself, I'm running with my phone, or trying to run with people. So there's, I've been smart about it, but and if anything was painful or truly felt like something was going wrong, I would obviously stop. But my heart rate's kind of slowly, it's kind of elevated when things like this happen. When I'm exercising, there's obviously something that's going wrong, and I don't know if it's. I know the Rituxan takes about a month to get really embedded in your system, and that's kind of where we're at. And I don't know if that's causing some haywire things, because, heart palpitations and heart arrhythmias are one of the side effects that can happen with the drug. But once again, there wasn't really shown any rhythm issues. I can just tell you, and that I was getting very frustrated because the nurses and doctors weren't really listening to me, because normally when I tell them I'm a vasculitis patient, I was there for over 3.5 or 4 hours before anybody even asked about my medical history. Like what I was doing, whether I had, people, they deal, unfortunately, there's a high case of heroin and opioid issues in the area. So they're used to seeing a lot of that stuff. So that was a question that was, have you taken any, legal or illicit substances? And I was like, no. And it was like, once they answered that, they kind of just didn't care about anything else. So they didn't ask about my medical history, didn't see anything on my, didn't mention it, even though that, like, I've seen doctors in that system, and it's obviously on my chart. It's not a question that came up at all. And then when the doctor was, and I understand, like, this is not her area of expertise and everything, but clearly when she did her looking and reading, she kind of just, I think, skimmed it and didn't really understand what she was saying. Which also frustrates me, because people's kind of egos get in the way. And this is where it really would have been smart to for her to kind of take time, like some of them have. A lot of them try to take time to really kind of figure out what's going on, need to talk to your doctors or whatever. But she was like, oh, well, like, I mean, you have vasculitis, like, you know, there's probably just going to be like, you know, it causes pain, like, you know, it causes joint pain, and, you know, it can be in your heart and stuff too. So it's probably just causing pain there. Like, I wouldn't, you know, maybe just check up with your doctors or something. And then when I leave, and I was like, what she just doesn't understand, and what she just said is like, if it's actually in my heart, that's the last stage of my disease and fatal and dangerous. And she just was willy-nilly about it. And like I said, I understand that she is working in an ER, but that's when you have to slow down and take the time with a patient, especially if you got something rare. That's when it could have been, you know, beneficial for her to speak to one of my doctors, any of them. You know, one of them is in her system. She could have called and gotten a quick rundown, probably much better than whatever she was reading online or wherever she did it. Because it sounded like to me, when she talked to me, she literally just Googled it and read like the first line off of Wikipedia, or the first paragraph off of Wikipedia. So I was just like, she doesn't realize what she just said, does she? Because like, if it's in my heart and causing pain, that's extremely dangerous. But anyways, they let me go. There seems to be nothing wrong. I've contacted my doctors this week, and I'm actually meeting with a cardiologist next week at Chapel Hill to just double check before I really continue to get after it. I'm obviously still running every day. I'm still at the gym. There doesn't appear to have been any more major episodes. Things have kind of seemed to alleviate and get a little bit better each day. There's a little bit less uneasiness. But it certainly was scary, and especially, you know, that first few hours afterwards had me thinking a lot. And, you know, anytime that you have a kind of a brush or life or death moment, it causes you to kind of sit back and think. And, you know, if I'd have had a heart attack, that would have probably been it for running for me, especially at the elite level. Like, I probably obviously would need to get exercising again and stuff, but trying to run to PR or be one of the best in the country, like, that would have been over with. So that was, you know, there was a lot of those type of thoughts. And, you know, am I doing this right? Have I pushed my body too far? Which in all likelihood is probably something that's more likely to blame at this moment in time for what's going on, you know, after that infusion and cranking things back up so quickly. I might have just gone a little too hard, a little too quick, because it is this hard balance between balancing when your body, like mechanically or physically, like from a muscular standpoint, has been to a certain level and can handle certain amounts of things. It's hard for you to judge what's too much sometimes, because like my body's capable of handling so much more from a muscular and physical standpoint. It's way, you know, what I've even been doing over the last several months is still, you know, probably only about 75 or 80% of what I've been able to do in the past. So physically it's not as demanding on my muscles. So it's hard to really truly gauge effort sometimes. And then as a vasculitis patient and also as an endurance athlete, your pain threshold's already wildly screwed up. So it's a really difficult balance. And sometimes until you go over the edge, as smart as I try to be with, you know, eating right, staying hydrated, getting enough sleep, living the right lifestyle, you know, you can still take a step over that line. And I might have done that. I think when I look back at kind of what I've done the last couple of weeks and, you know, with everything, I might have just sort of piled on too much at once. And it was my body's way of just saying, like, listen, bro, you got to slow down. But no, I'm certainly still running. I've run every day since then, and it seems to have gone decently enough. I obviously haven't really been doing intense workouts again. It might not until I see the doctor, but I'm obviously not going to be able to lose fitness here in the next week. I'm still running every day, still doing the things I need to do, still living right, and eating right, and doing the little things necessary to be an athlete. But the intensity is just not there, which obviously probably needed to be pulled back a little bit. So it was frightening. it also reminded me that I've got an amazing support staff and family and girlfriend that were all prepared to handle something like that. And I can't thank them enough. I probably waited a little late to call my mother and my father. I tried to wait till they were awake. But they obviously would have wanted to know the minute I probably walked out the door. But everybody that reached out and saw the social media posts that I had, thank you all for your well wishes and your thoughts and prayers and everything. But I'll say this: it was scary, but it definitely reminded me that I'm definitely doing what I love to do, and I don't want to say I don't have regrets in life. There's a ton of situations I wish I would have handled better or done different. But I don't have any regrets as far as like living the lifestyle that I want to live and doing what I want to do. There's some things that I wish I'd done, obviously, as a dumbass teenager and early 20s that might would make my life a little easier, a little better now. But that's part of growing up, part of learning. And no matter what you do, you're not ever going to do anything perfect. So there was only one way to learn. So doing that, doing things the way that I did in my early days, I wasn't the best patient. I wasn't the best, I wasn't as diligent as I could have been or even knew to be about all the little things it requires to be an elite athlete, et cetera. Even how to handle the elite athlete world once I got out of college. I didn't understand some of that. And obviously if I knew knew then what I know now, like it would be different. But definitely thinking back this week after that scare where it's like, man, this could be it. This could be done. I'm like I told Kit Fox last year on that Human Race podcast. It's like, I know I've given it everything I got. And I think that's obviously, true when you look at the situation that I just put myself into by possibly overdoing it a little too much. I've been willing to explore the true limits of my physical and mental and emotional capabilities as a human. And I think there's kind of two ways to live in life for enlightenment or whatever you want to call it. And one is the very Buddha way and shut yourself off from the world and forego all of life's pleasures in an attempt to enlighten yourself. Whereas I feel like I've probably overindulged in all of them, overindulged in the experience of making myself a fine-tuned athlete and dealing with all the health issues I have has really taught me a lot. And I really feel like I've explored the outer reaches of my sanity, of what's physically possible for my body. And, had I had to be done on, or even for some strange reason, somewhere to happen and they tell me I have to be done, I know that I've done at each given moment that I've done pretty much everything I could to be the best athlete that I could be. And it was weird coming to that realization again, because it's been a while since you're confronted with that. And, those moments have a way of putting kind of, I don't want to say putting everything in perspective, because that's kind of the cliche of way of saying it, but it's, it reminded me that I'm doing what I love to do. And I said that several weeks ago when I learned that I would be doing this regardless, I would probably still be running and myself silly, or trying to see how hard I can run even when nobody's watching, even if I was the only person left on planet Earth. Now, because there are people, I want to share my sport with people. I want to share my experience with people. I want to put on a show. I am a showman by nature, hence even this podcast, and things like my book and the talks and everything. I feel like I have a set of skills and knowledge that I want to share with everybody now. I like putting on a show. I love racing in front of a lot of people. Racing in front of no people is actually no fun at all to me. That just is like practice, and I think it's stupid. I would much rather be in a stadium with 20,000 people than just having 10 people on the sidelines watching. So I know Yeah, and I think that's, not that I was obviously on death's door this last weekend, but I think with that little scare, it's just like it forces you to reflect. You don't have a choice. Your mind just goes there automatically. It's not like it wasn't like a movie scene where my life was flashing before my eyes and I was seeing all my childhood memories. And no, it was more just kind of like taking stock of where you're at and what you've done and the impact that you left. And it's like, I think I've done, I think I'm doing, everything that I've set out to do, the best I possibly can. And to be content with that kind of when you're at your worst, I think lets you know that you're doing the right thing in life. And that's what I learned this week. I challenge everybody every week to go out into the world and learn something that might just change your mind. But what I learned this week didn't necessarily change my mind. It reaffirmed my position when I inserted a bunch of new data into it, and that new data being like, oh my God, reminding you that it is just life's fickle, life's temporary. We're all going to die. One of the horrible jokes I also like to say is we're all dying. Some of us just faster than others. It's something you have to kind of confront yourself with. And I got there this week. I'm out on the other side of it. I'm here. I'm still talking. I'm still blabbing. I'm still running on my own 2 feet. And still got a lot to accomplish, but I just want the world to know, or anybody that ever listens, I want everybody to get to that point in their life when they get confronted with their own mortality, because, everybody's heard the cliche sayings about like people like regretting things or not taking time on their deathbed to do, spend enough time with friends and family or whatever it is. I kind of was there and realized that, I think I'm doing this right. I think I've got this right. I think I've got the equation right. Now, obviously, we're always learning and always growing, and that equation will probably change again in another few months or another year or two or whatever. But I realized that if it would have been something major that stopped me from running or impacted my life or, something that ended it, it's like, I'm doing this right. And I'm happy about that, but I'm also happy to not leave because I do still have a lot that I want to do. I'm still kind of uneasy about kind of the current situation. Until you have a firm answer, it's never easy. And that's why I'm going to see a doctor. Originally, I was like, screw that. Like, if they didn't find anything wrong or major wrong, then, there's no reason to keep looking. But past experience has taught me that it's always better to seek somebody out smarter, seek somebody out that has a better understanding of your disease and your illness, that's also going to take the time to sit and talk to you, and not just throw you out the door and want your money. I mean, still the whole situation just blew my mind that I was in the middle of an episode of a potential heart attack. Like, they don't know at that point in time that I'm not having one. I've told them I have extreme chest pain into my left arm and in my neck, and a weird feeling heartbeat, and they're wanting my money. And to that, I can just kind of say F them. And that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day that we'll get into. But I think when you get confronted with those type of situations, it changes the way you think about medicine, think about access to medicine. When those things aren't, really looked at. And, a lot of other people, when you've never been in those situations, you can't understand what that's like. And I think that's why the conversation is not being had correctly when it comes to healthcare and access to healthcare. So that's probably a topic we will be tackling on here at some point in the future. That's a topic that I'm always learning about, always talking to patients about. But I can tell you this from dealing with a lot of other patients around the world, that that type situation wouldn't have happened in most other major civilized countries. They wouldn't have been worried about whether or not I could have paid them before checking me to see if I was having a heart attack. So it was, it made you feel nasty. I've just kind of felt gross since then. But anyways, I'm alive. I'm still kicking. I am not done. So don't expect me to be done. I will say now it kind of, everything that seems to be going on kind of seems fairly similar to the weak heartbeat and problems I was having last year after some of my infusions. So it might just be how my body reacts to the infusions and something that I can kind of ride out. But I mean, I made it 10 miles a day and didn't have a problem. So, you know, we're just going to continue to click away. I'm going to keep talking to you. I'm going to keep sharing this story. I'm going to keep sharing more about this journey so that hopefully I might change somebody's mind about the things that a lot of people have to go through in life, because healthcare is also one of those things. It's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when. At some point in time, you're going to have to deal with them. And I want that experience to be better for everybody, because that experience I went through last weekend was terrifying. So unless anybody has any other stories or something that they want to share, I know there's been a few comments and stuff here. I've kind of taken up your time enough tonight talking about something that is scary and kind of down. But I'm still here, guys, and I'm not down about it. I'm more down about the situation of how everything was handled than I am about the actual current situation in my chest with my heart. So, but it's still beating, and we're going to keep running and keep trying to make a difference in the world. Tim, you are right. I have road IDs actually hanging in my car, and I had filled some out after Cameron died. But this is going to sound incredibly pretentious, but I have so many pairs of running shoes, I just can't keep enough of them on my shoes. You know, I did it for a while after Cameron passed away, and I have not been diligent enough about putting them on new shoes, because when you run a lot, you do unfortunately burn through a lot of shoes. And so I either need to get something for like jewelry wise to wear, or something, you know, something better. The road ID is obviously incredibly smart tool that I should be utilizing. But once again, I'm an idiot and stubborn and hard-headed, and I won't. But anyways, if anybody is on here now that missed the events earlier, I will be this Saturday in Chapel Hill at the chapter, the Vasculitis Foundation regional chapter meeting, where Dr. Frey will be having a big mindfulness talk. I'll also be doing one of the breakout sessions on exercise, nutrition, you know, dealing with kind of general health stuff. Any questions anybody want to ask me, I'll be there. I'll also have some books there. Then we've got, I'll be at Up and Running in Boone, North Carolina on April 19th for the group run and stuff, as well as a little hangout afterwards if anybody wants a book. I'll also have some with me there, and then I'll also be auctioning off a book as part of the Vino for Vasculitis charity fundraiser. It's an auction. They are auctioning off a ton of amazing stuff. I threw up the link to that at the beginning of the episode. If anybody is in the Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill area and would like to come out to that event, tickets are still available and stuff. So it's an exciting time. There's a lot going on in April. I haven't even discussed. April is just a bad month for my family, and we're coming up on my 10-year anniversary of diagnosis. My family also lost another child in April. I lost a friend in April. April is just a rough month for the Hudgens household. So if we can plow through this next month here, then things should be in the clear. But those are the places I'll be. I've took up enough of everybody's time tonight. I thank you guys for, I said it earlier, everybody that's been involved in the story and has reached out to check on me. I'm incredibly, I can't thank all of you enough. I thank all of you every single week for tuning in and listening and sharing. And then if there's Any information that you heard tonight that you want to ask more questions about, please comment on the video. I'll get to it. If it's something personal, shoot me a direct message. I try to follow up with everybody. So if I missed something, I'm sorry. Some things have been going on lately, obviously, that I've had to deal with. But yeah, please reach out, check. I just want to have a conversation. That's all this is all about. And I think when you can understand people and what they go through a little more, it opens your eyes to and changes the way you think for the better. So that's what I'm going to leave you guys with this week. Once again, thank everybody. And next week we'll hopefully be back to actually still be a day before my appointment, but hopefully I'm feeling a lot more chipper about what I've been through and not just a few days removed from a life-threatening event, or a seemingly life-threatening event. But I'll be back again next week, as always, at 8 p.m. on Wednesday. Until then, guys, remember to go out into the world and go out and learn something that might just change your mind. See you next week.